Perfect. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's great to have you with us on the ELNET Monday Zoom. My name is Marta Kubica. I'm the CEO of ELNET's office in Warsaw, dealing with Central and Eastern Europe. This is a very interesting piece of map right now, um, and we're very lucky today. We're very lucky today to have a very special guest with us. Freshly back from Israel yesterday, from our second ELNET Women mission to Israel. We're hosting today retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Robbins, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, who is also right now Vice President of FDD. Beth, thank you so much for being with us. I would like to say a few words about the military delegation. So we just came back from Israel from a 5-day very special mission to Israel of female high-ranking active and retired personnel from 6 NATO countries who wanted to learn how Israel integrates women across its armed forces. Russia's ongoing aggression is forcing European military leaders and countries, especially on the eastern flank, to explore best practices for defense, including integrating women into their fighting forces. That was the reason why we brought this very special delegation. And I'm very happy to welcome our speaker today. I believe this is going to be very interesting conversation. Beth, thank you so much for being with us. I know you're very jet lagged. You just came back from Israel, and you're back in the US. But again, thank you so much. Great to have you. And to kick us off, can you give us a quick snapshot of the mission? Where the participants went, with whom we've met, and how did this program differ from your previous Israel delegations? I know you've been very much engaged with AIPAC and other organizations. So how did this program differ in focus, access, and tone?
Yeah, thank you. It's such an honor to join you. And at the top, I'd like to thank you, Marta, so much, as well as my friend Mark Sachs for introducing me to the ELNET community, Joanna, Rachel, Yossi Abravanel and Israel, who did such a great job with us. And also ELNET co-founder Larry Hochberg and his wife Sue, who I was honored to meet and have dinner with right before the delegation kicked off. So this was a delegation unlike any other that I have been on. It had a goal, laser focus, to learn how Israel has integrated women into its national defense, including combat and command, all while fighting a 7-front war that's gone on for more than 2 years. So we had senior women military officers, incredibly impressive women, many of them trailblazers in their own right, from Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Czech Republic, Poland, and Finland, and me from the US filling out the crew. Super fun to spend time together and to learn from each other. I'd never been with such a group of powerhouses, I think, and they were all just very generous with their ideas and with their time. The relevance of this, of course, was that these Central European countries are all looking east at Putin and his unprovoked aggression against Ukraine and the saber rattling he is doing against their own countries. And they're seeking to strengthen their militaries and increase their understanding of how to improve the quality of their voluntary recruits and how to better do conscription. And as part of this, they're looking at expanding the conscription of men as well as women, and in some cases looking at really leaning in on that. So the difference from previous delegations, I think it was really the focus on the soldier perspective. Previous delegations that I've been on have met with the most senior military national security personnel, and we did some of that, but this one really focused on the recruiting, on the soldier experience, and really understanding what drives these young Israelis to get up and defend their countries. So, so many touch points to touch on. Some highlights, of course, was meeting sailors, young sailors, going down south onto the border with Sinai. Of course, seeing the difficulties that Israel experienced on October 7th, really understanding how rape was used as a tactic of war and the aftermath of that. And also seeing how Israel is standing up and moving forward. The tone, I was last in Israel 16 months ago, and the tone was much improved. To have the live hostages back, and while we were there, two more came back. Since we've been back, two more have come back of the deceased hostages. So this is definitely a society that is it's on the mend, but so many uncertainties that we heard regarding the 20-point plan. Phase one is not over. Phase two, the details are completely unknown to, I'm sure, to many of you on the call as well. So a lot of unknowns as well.
Can I ask what was for you most impressive or surprising encounter? As you mentioned, we met so many wonderful
Yeah.
women. One person, unit, or a moment, and how was it for you, and why?
So I think we saw just an incredible commitment of Israel's young service members. Even 2 years on, there were more than 400 soldiers killed on October 7th. Since then, another 471, I believe, have fallen in combat. The reserves have been stretched almost to the breaking point, but we kept seeing these young service members just with, I think the only way to describe it is joy in their service. Um, for me, the most interesting part, I think one of them for sure, was meeting a tanker. And basically, we know that Israeli leaders, they emphasize capability over gender, but I personally have been against opening up tank positions to women in the US for strength, for hygiene issues. Tank shells, they weigh about 40 to 55 pounds. That's 18 to 25 kilograms. And some types can be even heavier, and loading them requires tremendous strength as well as technique, and it's repetitively done. Like the reload time is less than 10 seconds. So we met a young female tanker who, I don't think she came up to my shoulder, and a slip of a girl, and she has been meeting the standards as a loader. So that was impactful for me. Also, I mean, she talked about breaking down the track, like at least for like the U.S. Army, our M1 Abrams tank, the track blocks weigh little less than 70 pounds each. And when you have to rebuild the treads, it's a super labor-intensive task. So she spoke about that, and she said that her all-female crews are able to do that. And she talked about how having an all-female crew, which we don't have in the US, allows for greater cleanliness and privacy. And they take great pride in ensuring their tanks smell good inside, which I think got a good laugh from all of us. But the women we met were highly motivated. And their service allows on Egypt and Gaza, on those borders, allows all male tankers to go into Gaza and southern Lebanon. So that's an important note, that the female tankers we met, they perform border security. They do not leave Israel proper. And as I noted before, we had some really hard discussions about rape as a tool of war used by Hamas. I mean, really hard discussions. It was used on both women and men, but Israel tries to employ its female combat forces in ways that minimize the possibility that this occurs. And I think meeting the highly motivated female tankers was made a big impression on me. How about you, Marta?
Well, the woman you described was she seemed to be very fun. but also extremely motivated and very proud of what she's doing, that she's able to do service in a position that until very recently was actually closed for women in the IDF. So she really seemed to take a great pride that she is where she is. And I think my second favorite was our completely off the record meeting with two female navigators from the Israeli Air Force, age 27 and 31, who participated in bombing Iran during the last war. And again, their motivation was pretty incredible because in order to join the military academy in the Israeli Air Force, you need to sign up a contract of between 10 to 13 years. So at the age of 18, you must be extremely motivated to really put the next 10 years of your life on hold in a way in order to become a pilot or a navigator, which we learned, at least I learned, seems to be more responsible job than being a pilot of F-16, for example. But what was striking to me and also to I think all the participants that I had a chance to talk to was that all of those women that we met were extremely feminine. And I think this is something that, at least in Europe, we have this prejudice that if a woman joins the army, she will immediately look like a man. And those wonderful Israeli women completely proved us wrong. That you can keep your femininity, you can be so
Yeah.
beautiful and strong at the same time. So that was very, very
To a
eye-opening.
soldier, I don't know if you how you did this, but to a soldier, they were beautiful,
Yes.
just inside and out, and calm and confident. Um, and that was really a joy to see how, and several of them were married, and they talked about how they manage married life with their military duties. But they were comfortable in their skin, and they were
Yes.
comfortable in being women and being warriors. And I think that was joyful for us to see as well.
And very, very impressive for the European participants from the feedback I received. Um, so, Beth, taking into your experience in the US Armed Forces, why are the women mission critical to modern militaries? And what do you think the women of the IDF can teach European and also probably US counterparts about, recruitment, training, leadership, and general unit culture?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line are modern militaries need women in uniform. They're generally higher quality than male recruits in academic ability, kind of raw intelligence, executive function in all areas except physical strength. We heard this finding borne out by on the trip by both IDF male and female commanders who spoke with us, as well as by a CSIS researcher that gave us the background on women in the military. One of those researchers, Panina Sharvit Baruch, taught us that the war taught Israel two things. One is that women can do it, and that the second was that they can perform in combat. Basically, the new technologies can help them perform. So women can do it. They can do perform in combat, and that also that the military needs them. They can't live on reservists. They need more women to support, again, using technologies that make the service less physically demanding. Um, so I think you've probably read about this. Israel's going through just some real strains right now, with its reserve forces being overutilized, and the ultra-Orthodox declining to commit. They say their Torah is their vocation. Um, Thursday, the day we left, there was a large demonstration of 200,000 or so in Jerusalem. So the needs of Israel are such that they need to take advantage of the skills and the discipline and the drive of women. And Israel's model of integration is unique among modern militaries. I mean, since 1949, Israel's had mandatory conscription of both men and women, one of only a few countries in the world. Men are generally drafted for 3 years and women for 2 years. And then women can also opt out and pursue national service instead, such as like helping senior citizens or at-risk youth. But women make up about a third of all the soldiers who join the IDF, and more than 90% of IDF units have positions open to women, although full inclusion is not happening yet. In infantry, armor, and maybe will never happen. Most commando units are closed. They don't really want women going into Gaza, into Lebanon, into Syria, but there's many positions that can be capably filled by women. And over the past decade, we learned that the percentage of women choosing combat roles has dramatically increased. On the trip, we heard a lot about an Israeli woman named Alice Miller, who in
Yes.
1995 sued the Minister of Defense because she had refused entry into the IAF's pilot course on the grounds of her gender, and she won. And this goes back to kind of Israel's Declaration of Independence, which said that sex as a group classification is guaranteed equality in social and political rights. We learned that Israel has a gender affairs advisor at the highest level and gender advisors available to commanders and women themselves at every level. So there was a lot that I think the IDF could teach us on how the IDF is utilizing these highly motivated women and helping them perform with appropriate supports.
Right. One of the goals of the mission was to really expose the European military leaders and the senior advisors, uh, so they can understand the motivation of Israeli women joining the IDF. Of course, we're not talking the mandatory conscription, because in Israel, everyone knows that sooner or later they will go to the army. So there is not really a choice or a motivation, but rather a motivation of the female warriors, women who decide to stay longer in the army, and why they do it. And I believe there is so many lessons learned for us in Europe, sorry, to that we'll be able to really utilize and translate into probably public affairs, public campaigns, educational campaigns, to really show not only what you can give to your country by serving in the military, but also what actually the military gives you. Because I think this is one of the biggest takes from this mission, that all those wonderful women, they were saying that, they were telling us that, of course, we're here because, our parents fought in the army, because we want to give back to our country, but they also want to have a great career start. And it's not very common that when you're 18 or 19, you can become a commander of a unit and have those really learn really those high level management skills, and have this incredible, very, I'm looking for a word, sorry. Ah, okay, I'll get back to you. That they
It's
can
an opportunity, an incredible opportunity.
opportunity,
Yeah.
but also, yes, it's a great opportunity to really learn the skills that probably it would take you years to reach that position in business, for example, or anywhere. And after 2, 3, 5, 7 years, you're a highly skilled manager, and a warrior at the same time. So that was for me also very interesting to hear. Beth, let's move a little bit to Washington and the Washington's point of view. How is the US approaching the arming and sustainment of NATO's eastern flank?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some news over even the last week on how the U.S. is facing it. I mean, I think the U.S. is seeking to have burden sharing. The president has felt that the U.S. has been carrying too much of the burden of NATO's defense, and is uh, in his first term and now in his second term is trying to increase the burden sharing of the countries themselves, and also ensuring there's technology transfer and kind of mutual capability building and capacity building all at the same time. So we saw just last week, the U.S. confirmed it will not rotate replacement troops, um, one of the brigade combat teams of the 101st Airborne Division. So it's reducing a little bit of the number of people in the eastern flank. But like US Army Europe and Africa, they characterize this as a positive sign because the capability of our European partners is increasing, and our NATO allies are meeting the president's call to take responsibility for their conventional defense. So I think the US is still highly committed to the eastern flank. Um, the US Army, NATO are developing something called the Eastern Flank Deterrence Line, EFDL, since we have to put an acronym on that,
Of course.
to counter Russian aggression. Um, so I think the US remains highly committed. It's just we're trying to help Europe stand up and make sure we have good partnerships so that we can focus on other problems, specifically the growth of a strong China.
Um, can you tell me how was it for you to spend almost a week with those Central Eastern European women leaders? Did you learn anything? Was anything in their approach uh, new or surprising to you? Because very often, you know, Central Eastern Europe and the Baltics, we meet very often. We stick together, we talk together, but very often we have, I would say, outsiders, people from outside of our region, especially from the United States, and especially with, such a military and political background as you have. So how was it for you?
It was wonderful. I mean, I have traveled. This past summer, I did travel to Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. And here in the US, people said, "Why would you do that?" As Marta joked to me. I mean, for Americans, Europe is France and Italy, right? Full stop. Maybe a little UK. So it was super interesting to go there and then to speak to them. These are, compared to the US, these are tiny countries. Um, as far as like this, the number of people in their military and their ability to defend themselves, but still their professionalism, their interaction, and also their English. I mean, let's just say my Polish and my Latvian is non-existent, but their English was perfect. Many of them had studied in the US, and I feel like they knew much more about the US than I knew about them, to my embarrassment. But it was really, really fun to learn about how they're thinking about things, and how they're approaching these really difficult topics. Like you talked about it briefly, Marta, about trying to recruit and trying to explain to young people why they should, join up and fight Putin. There's as a group, just during lunches and dinners, we were talking about like the ideological disconnect. Young civilians are in general against war. I mean, aren't we all? But they're against war. They're against military spending, which I'm not against. They're against kind of military group operations abroad in general. They're more individualistic. They're less patriotic. So they were very much taken by how these young Israelis were so patriotic and they felt so strongly. And part of the discussion was, at least in the U.S., we have to get whacked before we really stand up, as we saw through a number of wars, but obviously, World War II required Pearl Harbor, 9/11. These are like galvanizing events, and October 7th was definitely a galvanizing event for Israel. But lacking that, it's always best to prepare ahead of time, and it's hard, these women were sharing, to help these young people know what's at stake. If they do know what's at stake, they're more likely to step up, they're more likely to succeed, they're less likely to suffer the mental health challenges of military service if they know all of these things. But at this point, even with everything happening in Ukraine, it's still a hard sell from ideological disconnect, from an economic opportunity cost. I mean, young Europeans, they're eager to get going on their job, and they're seeing a military job as like it's a stepping them back. It's holding them back instead of seeing it as an opportunity. Um, and then I think it's just a lack of shared purpose. What are we fighting for? At Ashdod base, we spoke to a woman in the am I saying the
Snapir unit.
Snapier unit. So she did harbor security. So she leads 10 men. And she said, we are doing meaningful work together. I mean, I wrote it down. I mean, it's like, we are doing meaningful work together. And she personally took part in intercepting 3 flotillas attempting to break the Israeli naval blockade of the Gaza Strip. And then I also wrote down, my parents and grandparents fought for me. Now it's my turn. I want to give back and fight for them. These are, I think the threat is so immediate that Israelis are seeing it. World War II was a super long time ago for uh, for our countries, and definitely Central and Eastern Europe. And so the immediacy is a little hard to explain. Why do we not want to live under Russian rule? What's at stake here? And I think my fellow participants feel like our countries are perhaps not doing the best job here in communicating what is worth fighting for, what are Western liberal values, why is democracy preferable?
Absolutely. And especially Baltic countries have one more challenge. You said something about, fighting for like a joint goal, that we fight for something. And I have a feeling that for us it's more fighting against Russia, fighting against Putin. It's not for us, it's against them. And this is, the only thing that technically unites us all. Um, but the Baltic countries have a big challenge with their own societies, because in both Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, there are still big numbers of population that either have dual citizenship, they have Russian and Estonian, or Russian and Latvian passports. They speak Russian at home. And many of them considers themselves as native Russians. So it's also very hard to integrate this kind of people into the narrative, we're fighting against Russia. So we really need to rediscover what is there for us and what do we want to fight for. And it's a big challenge, but I think that we had some great conversations, and I'm sure a lot of the participants, I believe all of the participants took something important for them home. Um, I honestly have to tell you, this was my favorite delegation so far, because of the participants, because of the content was very unique. And I told my husband after, when I came back, that it was actually great to spend a week in this really strong sisterhood bubble. It was really great. Usually in our field of work, there are more men that we work with on a daily basis. So that was very refreshing and very unique. Um, and I kind of can't wait for another women's mission, because it brings completely different vibe to our work, and also a further impact. Um, Look, we've been talking for half an hour, and we could probably do do it much longer. But I would like to remind our audience that they can post their questions to the chat. Um, and if there are any questions, please let us know. I'll be more than happy to convey them to our speaker. And I would like to, before we start with the Q&A, of course, I have plenty of other questions to ask you, Beth, but I would like to ask my colleague Sari for a quick intermission.
A word from our sponsor. Thank you so much, Marta. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Robbins. What a treat to hear such detail about the delegation. I do look forward to hearing more. And for those of you who are longtime supporters, especially if you join our international briefings often, you know that ELNET strengthens Europe-Israel diplomatic, defense, and economic relations. As with the delegation we're hearing about today, we connect European leaders with their Israeli counterparts on tailor-made itineraries in close cooperation with the Israeli government and military, who are grateful for what ELNET is able to do as an NGO. Thanks to the needs of our time and the growth of ELNET over the years, which is in turn thanks to Marta and our other high-powered, highly motivated directors, the pace of our current programming is intense. Our recent delegations include the first Portuguese MP's delegation, another military delegation that was not all women, a joint journalist delegation, a delegation of European Muslim imams, which made a splash in the news, Polish MP delegation, Italian infrastructure delegation, UK emerging leaders delegation, UK counter-extremism delegation, joint defense delegation, and of course this women's military delegation. Our upcoming delegations include a British MP delegation, Baltics delegation, Polish defense delegation, Italian MP's delegation, German MP's delegation. We have recent strategic dialogues, including one with Central and Eastern Europe, one that you may have heard about in Abu Dhabi, convening officials from Europe, Israel, and Abraham Accords countries, along with other Muslim and Arab countries that aren't yet in the Abraham Accords, and Germany-Israel cybersecurity discussion. And we have more coming up, a conference on gender violence in France, conference in France on gender violence, a discussion of the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC, in Italy, a UK-Israel strategic dialogue in London, a Germany-Israel strategic dialogue, and our Herzliya conference. There is so much going on, and we cannot do it without your support. So please, if you haven't yet, please renew your support for 2025. And even if you have renewed your support, please consider doubling your investment or increasing as much as you can so that we can keep up with all of these expenses. The dollar is down, our activities are up, and we want to have maximum impact, and we need your help for that. So thank you so much, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Sari. I have to say, listening to all the activities planned for all our offices, I think we're really all around the all around the map with that. I really feel bad for our Israeli team for organizing all those delegations. Um, we have a question from Mark Sachs, whose internet is really bad. So he asked me to to ask you this question, Beth. What were some of the specific problems the European NATO countries were looking to solve? Because they do have different needs. Beth, would you like to start answering, and then I can add a little bit more?
I think they're wondering how Israel has done it. And I think some transferable ideas were like establishing like clear criteria for the combat inclusion of women. I don't think that was necessarily as clear in some of the countries, and that was super helpful to see how Israel's done it. I think they also appreciated seeing the leadership of mixed gender units, making sure that that leadership includes women, and that the goal in Israel is kind of a cultural normalization where women in leadership roles is viewed as ordinary, that's the end game. We met with the first female. She's going to be captaining a battleship, and she hasn't done it yet. It was interesting. She was married and religious, and a really and beautiful and tiny and a sailor. And for her to be in this role is going to be helpful for everyone coming up behind her. So I think they were looking to see kind of percentages. We did have a good discussion about how we know in the US Army, like when I went to West Point, it was 15% or fewer, meaning I was usually the only woman in the room. And then that puts an enormous stress on that woman. You're representing all women instead of just being another soldier. And so, like, what are the percentages that make for a more successful mixed gender unit? And it's like generally 30% or higher, where it's normal. And we know this as well in the U.S. Army as far as race, to make sure we don't have, a single individual of a race. It's harder on them versus having just a more diverse unit. I think they also appreciated how Israel is making these decisions based on operational effectiveness. Like they did start to have women in special forces, and that was rolled back recently. So women are not in Israeli special forces. So these are decisions made on operational effectiveness, and not just reaching some kind of goal. So really transparently collecting and sharing data on success is very helpful. I think what's not transferable about what they learned is how service is just central to Israeli life. I mean, it's a very supportive society. All the high schoolers were talking about it, and speakers from the military come and present options, and they're studying and taking tests so they can place into the units that they prefer. This is not something that the U.S. can do. Some of these women said that they're being asked to use the military as a means of societal change. And, I made them laugh. I said that, like, yeah, that's also in the US. People think, yeah, let's make everyone join the military. But our military here in the US is 1.3 million active duty. Another about 800 reserve. So it's a total of 2.1 million service members out of 240 million people. It's less than 1% of our population is in the military. It's like 0.6%. And what we really don't want to deal with in the military is 4 million 18-year-olds every year. No desire to do that. And while the numbers are smaller in these Baltic nations, they also don't have the infrastructure to fix society through bringing people into their militaries. So it was kind of good to share ideas on that front as well.
Yes, I think this I think this exchange of, your perspective, their perspective, and the Israeli perspective was really new conversation. And I have to tell you that we were extremely proud to manage to bring, the highest level female officers from a couple of countries, especially that they got their approval before the ceasefire. And I think this really speaks to, first of all, the need, but second also to the trust of the Israeli know-how and experience, that no matter what, is going on politically, or no matter what's the Israel's image in the social media in Europe, these countries in the eastern flank treat Europe as a serious partner from which they can really learn. So that was for us, a big and very impactful achievement, I think. We already have planned a couple of seminars in the upcoming weeks in Latvia and Estonia. In the Czech Republic, there's going to be a conference tomorrow and the day after about women's role, women, peace and security, UN resolution. And two of our participants will be speakers and moderators there. So this was very timely event for them.
And just on that note,
Yeah.
I can't say enough how important it is to bring people to Israel. People have their they have their sense of what they'll find, and then it's what they find, and it's usually very, very different. And I thought you did a great job, Marta and ELNET, and just really highlighting, first providing a clear sense of the brutal atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th, but also showing the geography. We were right on the Sinai border, like exactly on the Sinai border. We were exactly on the border with Gaza, at Nahal Oz, near Oz, excuse me, and the Nahal Oz
Nahal Oz
observer base
yes.
at the north, not the kibbutz. And also just the fact that you put us in helicopters and we could fly the terrain and we could see, for me personally, another big takeaway, as I did not understand how the Bedouins it's out of control, absolutely out of control, the growth of Bedouin communities. And I didn't really get it until I flew it. And to see, for our participants, to see how small Israel is. Marta took us to the top of the Azriela Towers in Tel Aviv. We looked east where we could see the West Bank very easily. Was it 9 miles across the narrow waist of Israel? It's only by being there do you really get it. I mean, I think also, like, we got a COGAT briefing. This is talking about the flow of humanitarian aid into Israel. Just being there and seeing it and understanding it, it's different than if we'd had this briefing on Zoom and everyone was sitting in their own countries, to really understand
Absolutely.
what it took to get aid from the UAE and Jordan and Egypt and NGOs into Israel, from Israel into Gaza, and really addressing head-on allegations of genocide and starvation. All of the hard issues were addressed. As I mentioned, sexual assault, all were addressed really forthrightly in a really impactful way. So kudos to ELNET for that.
Thank you, Beth. We have a question about what you just mentioned. Were there discussions comparing the incidents of sexual assault within the IDF and US military? And if so, can you compare the manner in which each service handles those situations?
So unfortunately, in the US military, believe it or not, the majority of PTSD among female soldiers in the US is from sexual assault from US service members. This is a very different situation than in Israel, which we asked some hard questions, and it seems to be not the problem it is in the US military. And it was the sexual assault that we were discussing had been committed by terrorists. We did ask some hard questions of their medical leadership, like how are these things documented? And some very sad conversations. Israel had many civilians rushing down to the the Nova site and to these kibbutzim, trying to be helpful, and they would find women who had been violated, and they would, or killed, or both, and they would cover them out of respect for their humanity, thereby contaminating the crime scene. And so now, as follow-up, people are questioning whether it happened or not. And so there was some conversations about how to document, should this ever happen again, but also how to prevent such a thing from happening. I don't know if that answered it well. What do you think, Marta?
I think it does. It was just different. We also had some conversations about, sexual assault within the military, but we didn't really, we just got, yes, it happened, but I don't want to elaborate answer. But that was from our participants, not the Israeli side. And then we had this one situation in the medical training base where the head of medical training was actually asked by one of the participants, are the Israeli soldiers who are trained to be paramedics and doctors and field doctors, do they actually are they being taught a different approach to men and women who might have experienced sexual assault, taking into consideration the experience from October 7? And we really didn't get very clear answer, but you can clearly see that we didn't get the answer, not because they didn't want to tell us, but because this topic was still very raw and very moving to our speakers who've been there on October 7, who've seen things no one should ever see in their own life. So you can really see that this is still very raw, even among the top military professionals. And I think and also I heard that this human side of the IDF was, I wouldn't say very surprising, but was very new to the participants of our delegation. Because first of all, when you see IDF representatives in the media, it's mostly, high-level men, generals, the spokesperson of the IDF. They cannot allow themselves to project weakness, but behind closed doors, we have rather safe space where we can talk about those issues. So really this human and fragile side of the IDF was also, I would say, for me, a new experience. And also another feedback that I heard that I think was very important is that even though the IDF, Israel has always been portraying itself as the tough kid in the room because of the neighborhood, those people of the IDF and others, including some politicians, were able to admit that they failed. That it's not the state that failed us, but we failed the people. Like, remember the conversation with the female navigators who found out on October 7 what's going on in the south, but because they couldn't get any coordinates, they couldn't get any instructions, they couldn't just take their F-16s and drop the bombs whatever. So they felt like they're failing their own people, even though they have means, and the Air Force can bring so much that can actually change the situation on the ground, probably in the fastest way. But you need to know how to operate in order not to hurt your own people, not to hurt civilians, and also in the case of October 7, not to hurt the hostages. So that was, you could really see that they were extremely frustrated, that they had tools, but they couldn't act because of lack of communication, because people who are usually communicating with them were busy fighting the terrorists in the South on October 7 and 8.
But also, I think that
That's my take.
decentralized, yeah, no, the decentralized nature and kind of the empowerment of soldiers that I think you see in the US and in NATO, women that were part of the Caracal battalion, they assessed the situation and lacking orders, drove their tank more than an hour and a half north and engaged dozens of terrorists and saved lives through their actions. So the fact that they felt like they knew enough and they could do that effectively was also impressive. You know, these are not robots. They're not just cold-eyed killers. These are people who are thinking and trying to do their best in a really complex environment. And I think that they got a good sense of, you know, the complexity of the threat faced by Israel. Seema Shine of CSIS, a very well-known researcher. I mean, she talked about the seven-front war of, you know, Gaza and the West Bank, but Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, all masterminded by Iran, all simultaneously trying to obliterate Israel, and really getting a sense of how small Israel is in a really unpleasant neighborhood. I think that was effective as well.
I have a feeling that this conversation is shifting into very heavy territory. So Beth, this will be my last question before we move to Tom Flesch or Chairman. Can I ask you, what are you optimistic about in general? And also, you know, FDD is at the forefront of a lot of issues. Many of them are aligning with the ELNET work and the issues that we care about. How do you see the world vis-a-vis Israel now? And is there any chance that you might be optimistic about certain issues?
I am always optimistic. There's a poem in Proverbs, "Woman of Valor, Ashes Heil," and it says, "And she smiles at the future." And no matter what happens, we have to smile at the future and find the solutions and move forward. I think my fellow participants spoke really movingly about the energy and the joy of life they found in Israel that surprised them. Everywhere we went, there were bring them home signs, still very much top of mind, although the live hostages are home, and it did feel much better to be there. The trauma is lessening. It's still there. Loss and heartbreak were everywhere. And the trauma continues, particularly among the middle-aged. I mean, these are folks who they call it the conception, the conceptia, the sense that Gaza was not a problem that needed to be addressed, and that the real problems were Hezbollah and on the West Bank. This conceptia has really traumatized the middle age, because it's their kids who are fighting these battles and are fighting and dying. And it is because of this failure that their families are living through alarms. They're always tracking where the shelters are. You know, just walking around Tel Aviv, there are many signs saying, you know, public shelter this way. So yes, we did hear quite a bit of concern about phases 2 and 3. We're still in phase 1. They did express gratitude to the US, but they're concerned about possible over-reliance on the US, as you've heard Bibi speak to last week as well. I think we're definitely in a better place than we were 2 years ago. And I think there's a lot of reasons to smile at the future. And I just want to thank you, Marta, for this super impactful mission, and all credit to you and ELNET for organizing it. You know, at the gala, ELNET hosted a gala. How fun! While we were
Yes.
there, with a keynote speaker being this incredible woman, Michal Kotler-Wunsch, W-U-N-C-H. She's a former member of Knesset and most recently a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. And she told us that near the end of her speech, she said, it takes no courage at all to be an optimist, but a great deal of courage to have hope. And she said, because hope is based on a sense of reality, but you're still moving forward and working towards a positive future. So she said that the women on the mission are at the front lines of what is our shared war on humanity, and what is a shared war on humanity and on our shared civilization. And I think it was well received.